But the part that really fascinated me was the management and motivation and leadership part. And I put myself on every workshop I possibly could to understand more about that. Studied NLP, studied communication,
Right.
read a lot about of the leading management thinkers of the time, like Drucker and Tom Peters and the like, and try to sort of get a sense or understanding of how to get the most out of myself initially. And then somehow it morphed into an interest in serving and supporting others to do that. Started a business in the 90s.
Audacious Living Podcast, where we are dedicated to helping you live your best audacious life ever. I'm thrilled to have you here with us and appreciate you for taking time out of your day to join us. Now, living authentically and finding happiness through self-awareness is like embarking on a journey to explore the depths of your own being, much like a deep sea diver exploring the ocean's mysteries. As you delve into the unknown depths of your true self, you uncover pearls of wisdom and treasure troves of self-discovery that illuminate the path of true fulfillment and happiness. Now, Ray Martin is a seasoned leadership coach and entrepreneur with a passion of helping individuals unlock their potential and excel in both their personal and professional lives. With several years of experience in the coaching and leadership and development space, Ray brings a wealth of knowledge and insights to the table, and it's really good to have him here. His expertise in mindfulness and leadership brings a unique perspective to today's conversation. His journey of self-discovery and personal growth resonates deeply with the theme of living authentically and finding happiness through self-awareness. And like I said, it was great to have him here. So let's turn to our conversation with Ray. Hey, Ray, thank you for joining me on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's great that you could make the time to do this. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure, Audley, and it's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, we spend much time on this podcast and encouraging individuals to live their best audacious lives, and being able to engage in these types of dialogues, I think it's fantastic, and a great way of encouraging individuals to do just that. And a big part of living your best audacious life is really having a good understanding of who you are as an individual. I
Mm.
don't think without a strong sense of self, you really can achieve any level of greatness, at least not intentionally, right? Like, I mean,
Yes.
you can, people can hit the lotto numbers anytime and be, and do very well for themselves. But in terms of being very intentional, as we move on this path of greatness, I think there's some work there that needs to be involved. And as a coach, as a consultant and helping people to do that, I think you understand very, very well. And so maybe as a starting point, Ray, I can get you to fill our audience in a little bit about who you are and the work that you do, and kind of
Mm.
what's brought you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, I'll do try and keep it as short as possible on
No
the
problem.
first answer to that. I mean, I ever since I was a child, I was always interested in what made people really tick. I don't know why. I was just curious. I suppose as a student at school, I wanted to do the best I could, and I noticed some people seemed more motivated than others or more driven than others. And I was curious about that, why people were different in their levels of motivation and drive, and why some
Mhm.
people push themselves harder than others. And so I had a keen interest always on the side of my studies to understand a bit about human psychology, etc. And I don't think that ever really went away. And so when I went into the workplace,
Mhm.
the part of a business, like there was so much to make a business work, like technology and processes and employment, all this stuff. But the part that really fascinated me was the management and motivation and leadership part. And I put myself on every workshop I possibly could to understand more about that. Studied NLP, studied communication,
Right.
read a lot about of the leading management thinkers of the time, like Drucker and Tom Peters and the like, and try to sort of get a sense or understanding of how to get the most out of myself initially. And then somehow it morphed into an interest in serving and supporting others to do that. Started a business in the 90s
Mhm.
called First Place, which was a consulting and coaching practice to help develop the leadership capabilities and performance of senior leaders, and
Right.
that's still the field I work in today. But I was an entrepreneur and I wanted to start my own company because I felt I was on a mission to really demonstrate that through what I call expressing more humanity at work, that had a direct effect on the bottom line of a business. Like if you were to support people to find more of a purpose and meaning in their work, to align them around a project they were excited about, that this would produce better returns for the business ultimately, even though there was an investment and a cost of time and effort. I always argued that the financial returns from that investment would be better. And in the 90s, the business I had, we developed a modeling technique which enabled us to put hard data around that thesis.
Okay.
And we were presenting business cases to companies to say what the bottom line impact would be after 12 or 18 months from an intervention with the management team. And of course, it was irresistible when you could see the numbers and the figures. And so we started to do that work. And sadly, my business partner, who I was running that company with, was my wife. And we did it for 10 years successfully. And then one day she said, it's quite suddenly and unexpectedly, I'm leaving you and I'm leaving the company and I'm out. So that was the start of a massive change. I'm going to pause here because I've spoken for a long time, but that was really when that phase came to an end.
So let's kind of go back. So when you started to do that presentation of the data,
yes,
companies, we're talking in the 90s.
Yeah,
right?
in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very, very early in this self-development.
Very early.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Like we're talking at a time where, yes, there were leadership experts and management experts that talked about this stuff.
Yes.
But certainly more widespread now than it was back then.
Yes.
Were those conversations difficult to have with organizations in terms of getting them to understand what the data really meant?
Yeah, they really were. It was like really like looking for a needle in a haystack to find someone who had the frequency range, let's say, to hear that message. You know, there were few and far between. There's a lot more of them now. The thinking has really shifted now. But in those days, it was we were kind of what they talk about in marketing as educating the market. That's what we were doing.
Yes.
Yeah, but now it's a mature market, so it doesn't need so much education.
Well, and we're talking about a time where the market almost didn't exist.
No, it didn't really. I mean,
Oh my.
transformation in organizations was something that was never really spoken about or thought of. And if you were speaking that language, you were considered to be either a bit weird or a bit spiritual or a bit crazy.
Well,
certainly not financially savvy.
No, well, people didn't know what it was. Right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
what are we talking
That's right.
about here?
That's right.
It's almost like you're speaking a foreign language, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
investing in people and putting them first and leading to serve, that kind of thing. Those are foreign concepts.
Yeah, exactly. You hit it on the head.
Okay, so how did you ascertain that data? What did you use to sort of help build your the key points of your presentation?
Well, it was going back now, so I'll sort of sketch it out for you as best I can.
Mm-hmm.
What we needed to do was to present a business case to the board, and particularly to the financial director of the board, to say, this is what we want to invest in this business to change the thinking and the way of working the leaders are doing.
Right.
This is the cost of the investment. And according to us, like if these particular leaders, let's say they worked in the sales area for business, and there were a couple of hundred people in that organization, we would, with a fine-tooth comb, have gone through all of the data that led through all the different conversion rates in their sales pipeline and process. Mm-hmm. So we could see that if we could get the telephone team to increase the conversion rate of inquiries to sales appointments from, say, 10% where it was to 15% over a period of a year, that would feed into more proposals and higher value proposals, and they would convert at a better rate. So we've done all the maths and the modeling using data that the company provided, and they provided us with two of their own financial managers who worked in the company to help us build the business case. So when we went back to the board, we did the presentation with two people from within the company, so that there couldn't be any doubt that we were making up numbers because these people worked in the organization.
Gotcha.
And we'd road tested those numbers against all the managers that would be affected by the implementation and said,
Right.
if we got this program to go ahead and we came to you and said, over 12 months, we want to lift your team's performance from here to here, doing these things, do you think that's feasible?
Right.
And they might say, no, we don't think that's feasible. So what would be feasible? And so we'd road tested the reality of it with each team before we'd even made the presentation. So we knew that people would buy into it.
Well, bravo and congrats on your sales efforts, because it would have taken a lot of really special sales techniques. Again, considering how early this was, like we commented earlier, like it took a lot.
Yeah, although I got to say it was not really a sales effort, because the first thing that the client bought was what we call a business case.
Okay.
And so that was safe to partition off. So there was no pressure on them to do anything afterwards, because the business case might show that it wasn't worth the investment, that there was the potential uplift couldn't be achieved. Then that would give the client the peace of mind of knowing that for a small amount of money, they've confirmed there isn't a route to growing that part of the business. And so that would be kind of also valuable.
Gotcha.
So some of them went forward and some of them didn't, because there wasn't such a strong case. But the ones where there were strong cases, they were just no-brainers, really.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your I guess your now ex-wife decides that she wants to go elsewhere. That creates a huge, because this is not just your personal, but your professional is impacted.
Yeah, everything.
And I understand the impact. If you look at like what divorce on itself, what it can do to individuals, it's groundbreaking, if you will. This is again both parts of your life.
Yeah.
How long or did it take you to recover, first off, and what sorts of things did you do to sort of get yourself back on your feet?
Well, it's a great question. A long time, but just to set the scene for you, in that period where we were building the business and having it achieve the success, it was fairly groundbreaking. Yes. And as a result, I'd been nominated for and received there's a broadsheet newspaper in England called the Daily Telegraph, which is quite well known. And I'd received their Business Leader of the Year award in 2002 for the work I'd done on pioneering this company and the work it was doing with clients. And so I had a lot of recognition publicly for who I was and what I was doing. And I kind of, part of that I liked, and a part of it put a lot of pressure on me. And so when my partner said I'm out, it was quite a shock, because I was sort of facing having to say I'm not so successful in public. Like my life behind the scenes is falling apart. Wow. And also for me, it was a really tough realization to realize. And I'm reading a book about this right now called New Happy. I'm halfway through it. It's really good. That my definition of success wasn't really fitting for my values and principles, the one that I'd been using my whole life, material success. I'd achieved that and actually wasn't very happy on the inside, if I'm really honest. I felt really out of place in a way. My father got very ill and died at the same time my wife and I separated. So suddenly everything I thought about life had sort of felt like it disintegrated. And I think I had about a year, to be honest, where I felt really down and depressed, and I really was lost all reason for living, really. And it was a really tough period because the company started to limp along a bit and I wasn't putting the same energy into it. And eventually friends of mine who really cared about me said, why don't you take a sabbatical and really get a new perspective on this? And I really did think that was a great idea, given the choices I had. So I minimalized my life and I sold my house in London so I could sort of release some money to take a 6-month sabbatical.
Right.
And gave away or sold pretty much everything I owned at that point. I left myself with a bag of clothes and a laptop and decided to go to Asia and do some backpacking because I'd never been a backpacker. I've been working since I was 16 nonstop, and I was now 45.
Right.
And I thought, I'll get some new perspective. I'll go to Asia. And after 5 or 6 months in Asia, I planned the trip for 6 months. I thought within 6 months, I'll return to England. I'll get a place to live again. I'll start something new. Something will occur to me. But after 6 months, I noticed I was still not ready quite to return and face new life. Something hadn't bottomed out for me. And I ended up going on a 10-day silent meditation retreat in a Buddhist monastery in Thailand called a Vipassana retreat, which at the time wasn't very common, but now is very, very common. People I know do these all the time.
Right.
And I started to learn about meditation and mindfulness through the teachings of the monks and through the daily practice of meditation. And I have to say that completely blew my mind. It just totally changed my frame of reference on life. That 10 days, I'd never been silent for more than 10 minutes before that. And to sit and just watch and observe my own mind, I learned so much about how I work as a human being. And on top of all the sort of learnings I'd done before, just everything started to make sense.
Yes.
And I thought, I want to follow this path a bit longer, because there's something in this deep self-awareness and knowledge, like you were pointing to earlier, that really is meaningful here. And I'm a very firm believer in that I think every person in life should find what I call their own true path.
Yes.
And I wanted to find mine. This is what my journey, my quest was. So I carried on, and the 6 months I'd planned didn't work out. I ended up living out of my backpack, Audley, for 14 years.
Wow.
It was a completely unexpected journey, because certain things happened. I started to do more around the mindfulness. Then I started to notice things that touched my heart while I was traveling.
Yes.
I started a fundraising organization, and I started running marathons to raise money for an orphanage in Nepal and an elephant sanctuary in Thailand. Then I started coaching managers in global multinational companies in Asia. And then just my life just started to take a completely new track. And that 14-year period, many different things happened in it. I acted in a play in Australia, which I never imagined I would do. So it was a weird and magical journey, but completely changed my life. And I eventually came back to England in 2019 to resume my work now as a freelance leadership coach, which is what I do.
Right. What I love about that, at least what I'm hearing, and maybe I might speculate a little bit, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but certainly what I'm envisioning and hearing is you just being very accepting of sort of what life presented for you during that 14-year stretch. I mean, you're talking about doing things you never saw yourself doing, being in a play as an example, and that certainly is a key aspect, a component of this podcast, right? Where it's you stretch yourself out you stretch in order to expand and grow. And sometimes when you're stretching, you're going into uncharted waters, things never tried, things never done. But despite that, you do it anyways and see what happens, kind of a thing. And and that certainly is a key tenet or foundation of what we discuss and talk about and encourage people here on this podcast. And I'm hearing from you, it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think my style of leadership, even when I was a CEO, was always to lead by example. I think what I see great leaders do is whatever they say makes a great leader, they do it themselves, and they do it first. So you can always see their greatness through how they're acting, how they're behaving, and the tone and quality of the dialogue that they're using in every conversation, and the care they're expressing. It's just something you feel around a person who's a great leader, because they are living their principles, they're living their values, they're living their beliefs. Like we all know cases where people have worked for someone who says one thing and does another, and the incongruency is so painful, to watch and to feel and to be around.
Yes.
And I've never wanted to be a leader like that. And I say leader because obviously leadership in a company is a role and a position as well as a mindset. But I think we're all leaders in our lives. We can all be leaders in how we see things in our community, in our families, and things like that. And so I don't know, I've lost my thread on this a bit, but for me, it was always important to be the person. And so I thought if I can work out what my own true path is, what I'm here to do, what my soul work is, and really start living my life in alignment according to a set of values and principles that I really truly believe in, and have a vision for life of the man I'd like to become, of the partner in a relationship I'd like to be, of the home I'd like to build. If I could have that vision and live it,
Right.
then when I'm working with people in the coaching capacity, I can really connect and empathize and really be there for them in service in a way that I otherwise couldn't, because I wouldn't have understood what they're
Of course. Of
facing.
course. Of course.
And that's why that was why it was so important to me to kind of bottom it out for myself.
It's so funny because one of the things I had in mind to ask you was how did this this 14-year journey, if you will, feed into the work and that you do now, and who
Yeah,
you become. I think you just described it perfectly, right, in terms of
yeah,
how you want to show up for people
yeah,
and the kind of impact that you want to have as well too, because impact is a very big part of what the leadership space or role is having
yeah,
that positive impact. So I'm hearing that loud and clear from you.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I think was I started to bring a lot more from my understanding of mindfulness into my coaching work. Whereas I think I had a lot of technical ability as a leader, and
Hmm.
I rationally understood the principles of great leadership and had some practices that kind of helped to execute those. But mindfulness brought a kind of new level of awareness and acceptance of myself, and I was
Yes.
able to share some of that teaching with people to say it's okay, it's okay, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. It's okay to to feel whatever you're feeling in the moment, because
Right.
when you're living in the present moment with that level of awareness and understanding, and you're
Yes.
understanding what that means, you're not you're not actually living in thoughts of the past that you're reliving,
Right.
and you're
Right.
not projecting into a future that hasn't happened yet and living in the anxiety of that projection that your mind is generating.
Yes.
You're actually just staying right here in this moment, like in the eye of the hurricane. You're in the moment, and
Yes.
everything's always okay in the moment. There's never a moment where everything isn't okay.
Right. 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 Right.
And
And
this was a big shift for me to get my head around. For it took me a while to really
absolutely.
reorientate, but now I see a lot of people making that shift, and it's brilliant.
Well, it does take a significant amount of practice
Yeah,
to
it
be able
does.
to live in the present moment.
Yeah, it really
Um,
does.
I wonder, just sort of on that vein, if you can sort of elaborate on kind of the kind of impact living the present moment can have on ourselves and even others.
Yeah, the kind of impact it has. Well, at the feeling level, for me, it just brings a calmness and an ease and a sense of acceptance of what is. So, like if I get to an airport and my flight's delayed or even cancelled,
Hmm.
and it's a business trip, without that present moment awareness and way of understanding life, I would be, full of emotion, probably
Sure.
rage, anger, frustration, irritation. I'd be seeking to find someone to unload that onto, and,
Yes.
probably acting quite uncompassionately and unskillfully, and really making myself the center of the attention of the universe and thinking
Right.
that I'm the most important person in that moment,
Yes.
and building my whole reality around that kind of idea. Whereas living in the present moment, I can accept, yeah, this isn't what I wanted or planned. It is what is happening. So I'm going to choose to
Right.
reform my reality now and make the calls necessary to make people aware of what's happening and see what other possibilities there are. And if we have to completely reorganize it, we'll do that.
And so I agree with you wholeheartedly because a big part of that also is understanding what's happening. So understanding what's happening in the moment, being aware of that, and
Yes.
appreciating what you have. Because I think in my own personal life, that every single time there's something that takes place that didn't go according to my plan,
Yes.
and again, we all have our plans, right? So it didn't go according to my plan, and it
Yes.
goes a different direction. Every time that I fought against that direction, it just got worse, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, okay, this didn't work out. What next? And
Yeah.
that what next oftentimes becomes something more beautiful than I imagined. right?
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean,
So,
to bring that to my own story, when I look back, Audley, the
mhm,
separation and divorce from my wife
mhm,
was such a gift for me because it opened me to such a deeper level of understanding and quality of living that I now enjoy that I didn't have. And I would never have even been curious about had it not been for the kind of pain and destruction of that period. It kind of gave me the motivation to get really curious.
mhm.
So there was a kind of weird beautifulness of that happening.
Yes,
There's
yes,
like a
yes.
synchronicity, a kind of often I think we think that guidance from the universe is all love and light and it's great. It should be all sort of harps and unicorns or whatever you would say. But often the guidance is coming in the form of that, really tough times and damage and adverse conditions. And it takes a while to realize sometimes, I'm I'm actually being guided here. I didn't
Yes,
realize it.
yes.
I thought I was being tortured, but I'm actually being guided.
Well, it's funny because the torture is what happens in our own minds oftentimes.
Yeah,
That's where the real
right,
torture
right.
is. We do it to ourselves. But
Yeah, exactly.
if you stop in the moment and I've heard tons of experts and leadership consultants and speakers all talk about that present moment, but more importantly, what is the lesson or what's being taught or what's trying to be revealed to you in this present
Yeah,
moment, right?
yeah,
Because there's always something. It's just difficult when we're tied into this. So, for example, I'm tied emotionally invested into this business trip, and all of a sudden my flight gets canceled. And,
yeah,
and I do think even within that, I think there's a lesson around what we choose to tie ourselves to, because if we the outcome oftentimes it doesn't go our way, we tie ourselves to the outcome, then my
yes,
goodness, and it doesn't happen. What next, right?
yeah,
Whereas that process, the journey, the interactions, the lessons learned, the people you meet on your way, the insights, the perspectives, the knowledge gained. These are far more important than the end result for us
totally,
individually. So,
totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
curious, where did you get the name the Daily Explorer from?
Great question. When I first left the UK,
Mm-hmm.
um, I was traveling with somebody who was like my girlfriend at the time, and we were backpacking together. And we both had this interest and desire to share what we were discovering, learning, and experiencing with their community of friends back home. And I highly value connection with others.
Yeah.
And I was asked in my book, Life Without a Tie, I wrote down in the book the 10 guiding principles that I use to reorientate myself from a
Okay.
shift of leaving a fixed life to a nomadic life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those principles was connection. And so I really wanted to find a way of honoring that value of connection and being connected.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2005, blogging was relatively new. No one was really
Yes.
doing it.
Oh
It
yeah. Oh
just
yeah.
just
Yeah.
taken off, and
Yep.
it
Yep.
was an interesting media. I thought medium. I didn't know anything about it, but I had time on my hands, so I studied and I found out how to do a blog and came up with a blog, and we called it tongue in cheek. We called it the Daily Llama, and it was fun. And it was written in the third person, so it was written by an editor called Mozzie Bite, and um, Mozzie Bite wrote about Ray and Annie, this lady I was traveling with, and often questioned us and interviewed us, saying, I caught up with Ray in Bangkok. I asked him what he thought of the place, and Ray said this, and I was quoted. So I was always speaking to the editor and writing like that. And a lot of people started reading that, and we've got loads of comments from people back home, but wider. I remember getting in a taxi in Bangkok one time, traveling back into Thailand from somewhere, and a couple were waiting in the line, and we said, "Do you want to share the taxi with us?" They said, "Yeah," because we're both going to the same place. And I said, "Where have you been?" And they said, "Oh, we've been to Laos or somewhere." I said, "Oh, what made you go there?" They said, "Well, we read about this place in a blog called the Daily Llama." And we went, "You're kidding us." We went, "That's us. We write that." And we couldn't believe the smallness of the world in that moment.
Right. Right.
It's telling us that we were doing the right thing, because over 100,000 people read that blog. It's really a lot.
I
But
love
then
it.
obviously Annie and I eventually broke up, and it had been a joint creation. And she rightly said, I don't think it's fair that you continue with the daily alarm. I think we should just stop it
Right.
because neither of us could take it from the other. It's been so joint. I said, okay, let's do that. And so I wanted to carry on blogging, but I
Yes.
didn't want to, I felt that was the right thing to do. And so I came up with this concept of the daily explorer because I was still exploring both the outer world, but I was also exploring within myself the meaning of
Yes.
life and things like that.
Yes.
And so that's how it started, and it's stuck ever since because it's become my way of describing the way I coach.
Sure.
Yeah,
I love I love it. I think
yeah.
exploration is a great, great, great
It's one of my
word.
core values. I've got 4 core values, and exploration is one of them.
Hmm. Well,
So
now we're on that. What are the other three?
for me, they are freedom, probably my most powerful influencer in life as a value, love, and I would say that's become more important to me in the last 20 years, let's say, than it was when I was younger.
Hmm.
Integrity. I'm a very big advocate of doing the right thing and being honorable and keeping agreements and things like that. My dad taught me that from when I was a child. And then exploration. So freedom, love, integrity, and exploration.
Wow, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Um, let's sort of talk about exploration for a bit, and I think that's a really it's a key one for us as individuals.
Yes.
Um, but there's a part of exploration, and again, it's really going back to knowing ourselves, because if we have a really solid sense of self, then when we go out into the world and the way we interact with people is not, it can be changed or adjusted and altered. For example, if your sense of self says I don't know, I don't go to the bar to drink, let's
No.
say, because I don't consume alcohol. Well, when you interact with people and they say, here, let's do this together, well, that's not what you do. And so that's still having, so against that sense of self. I wanted to talk about the importance of having that strong sense of self in sort of our daily interactions, and really why it's so important for us to be the person that we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I wish I could give like a textbook answer, and I could just give my own take on that because it's
Sure.
how just how it occurs to me. I think the best way to sum it up for me is there's a great book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leaders by a chap called Jim Dethmer. He's an American writer and leadership coach. And he talks about being above the line or below the line in terms of what motivates you in life. And obviously, people say, well, what's the line you're talking about? And he draws it as a
Mm-hmm.
line on a piece of paper. If you're living above the line as much as you can, you're open, curious, and committed to learning from every moment of life. If you're living below the line, you're closed, defensive, and committed to being right about what you think about life.
Mm-hmm.
And we generally tend to be in one or the other of those places. Nobody's 100% in one or the other. We all kind of, as it suits us, we move up and below. But his point was that the more, as a leader, the more time you can spend above the line, the more brilliant you're going to be as a leader, because every moment is a chance to learn something, be curious, be open, and learn. I've always that's for me been really important to live in that way, because we have a world at the moment where there's so much conflict because people live below the line. They are closed, defensive, and committed to being right, and it creates separation. It creates clashes over ideologies and ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It just creates never-ending conflict. There's no possibility of a different outcome.
Right.
And in organizations, obviously, it creates a lot of politics and negativity and people acting covertly, basically.
I think I do like that above the line, and because it really gives a good depiction of even where you are as an
Yeah,
individual.
yeah,
Um, uh, I guess one of the things that I look at, and so how I consider it is, by establishing sort of who you are and how you show up in the world,
yeah,
that sort of guides our path. Like I gave the example earlier,
yeah,
but what I think is most important is you prevent yourself from being trapped or caught up or being subject to the, what other people expect you to do, right? Like
Yeah.
expectations, especially for young people, for example, to be, when you talk about their relationship with their parents as an example, right?
Yeah.
And your parents want them to either, behave a certain way or go to a certain school or have a certain type of life or career. And if that's not in line with what you want, that's where the sort of conflict comes in. And
Yes.
so by being able to having that strong sense of self, I think you sort of pull yourself out of that trap, so to speak. I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't be, I love as a term I use in my work, which I'd say is about being a courageous learner, because courageous learners have certain habits. If you study great leaders or anyone who's great in any discipline, sport, business, doesn't matter, they've basically got really good habits. And in the leadership sphere, having courageous habits is having beliefs like you can only change yourself. You can't change another person. That's a really good habit to adopt. Or failing forward and failing fast, because we learn so much from our failures. And the more failures we can make, the more we accelerate our movement in the progress of our vision, because you're learning how to get to the place you want to through what's not working. If you're curious and open and you're learning from it, and you're reviewing it, it's great.
Love it. You're right.
And another one is holding opinions lightly. That's a great habit to have, because so much can be lost if you doggedly hang on to an opinion and you're going below the line with it, most of the time. And there's a couple of others like that, but I think having those kinds of habits is something I work with people on a lot. So yeah, it's really helpful for that.
Yeah, I do. I do like the idea of creating habits, because then that just becomes second nature. You don't think about it.
Yeah.
You just get up and go.
Yeah, you do for a while, because when someone's got an habitual way of thinking, to come along like a guy like me and suggest a new way of thinking, even if they put it into practice, it's like what are you, left-handed or right-handed, Audley?
Right.
Right. So if I said to you, I want you to start signing things with your left hand,
Yeah.
it's going to feel weird
Sure.
to write with your left hand
Sure.
for a while. But if you did that 5 times a day, every day for 6 months, you'd be able to do it exactly the same with both hands. So it's just a matter of practicing something that's not habitual until it becomes habitual.
As I mentioned, I'm a big basketball fan, and there's a story that the late Kobe Bryant wanted
Oh
to.
yeah.
He wanted to be ambidextrous, essentially. So
Right.
he actually practiced doing things with his left hand,
All
and he
right.
was actually right-handed, and he got so good where it's
Yeah.
like you can't even tell the difference now, because you could go right
Yeah.
or left. And I think that's a perfect example of what you're describing.
It is. I mean, I know it works because when I was traveling, I had a little pair of scissors to cut my nails. And when I was cutting with my right hand, it was easy.
Yes, yes.
But when I switched to the left hand, I could hardly hold them steady. It was like now I can cut both my nails with either hand the same, because I've done it for years,
Yes.
But in the beginning, it was weird. It was really tricky.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think one of the things when I think about sort of all that you've done and what you've talked about, and the connection to, there's lots of connections to what we do here on this podcast and talk
Yeah.
about.
Right.
But the thing one of the things that stand out to me is the idea of just living authentically, being true to yourself.
Yeah.
I think that really is a starting point for any sort of great success, and I'm hearing
Yeah.
that loud and clear through your work, which is wonderful.
Definitely. It came to me because I was in a very dark moment, when my ex-wife left and my dad died, and I saw my vision of the life I had just crumble in front of me. And one of the things that brought me some solace in that period was a book I read called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by a lady called Bronnie Ware. And she is an Australian nurse who works in a hospice. So she only works with people in the last days of their lives. And she interviews every single one and asks them one question: what do you most regret about your life? And she says in the book that she could tell you, doesn't matter what someone did, whether a basketball star or a millionaire or a janitor, it didn't matter. They all said the same 5 things that they most regretted. And the number one regret was, I wish I'd lived my life true to myself. not the life that others expected of me. And that when I read that, I was in such a dark place, it just hit me between the eyes like a punch. I thought, I need to know what that is for me. I'm not doing anything else until I can answer that question. And so that inspired me, and it's always inspired me since. I've shared that book with thousands of people. And so that's how it started for me. And living life true, it means that every moment you're making choices from that place. Do I want to go to that place to eat or that place? Or do I want to stay at home? Do I really want to go to that party?
Right.
Do I really want to watch that TV program? No, I don't.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned your book, Life Without a Tie. I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, when I left in 2005 to find my own path, I had no intention whatsoever of being a writer. I wasn't a writer at all. I started the blog to learn how to write, and that helped me learn a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept meeting people who read the blog and met me, and they said, "What made you start this journey?" And I told them some of the stories that we've shared. And they listened with real interest. And a lot of them said to me, "Ray, if you ever write a book about any of this, would you email me and let me know? Because I'd really like to read it." And I just laughed. I said, "You're kidding. I'm not writing a book. I just not interested in that." And once it got to about 50 people that would give me their email addresses, I thought, oh my God, the universe is telling me something here.
Yes.
I'm getting this message. And then 60 and then 70, I thought, oh my God. So I left in 2005, but about 2010, I thought, I'm going to have to write this story as a book. So I went on a writer's course in 2011, 5 days, to work out what writing a book involved. It didn't learn much, but enough to get me started.
Right.
But I didn't really start writing till about 2015 because I was still in the journey. So 4 years later, I started writing. And in 2020, last year, the book got published. Here it is, Life Without a Tie.
Wonderful.
And ever since then, since that book came out, I've had so many amazing, amazing conversations with people all over the world who somehow managed to get a copy.
I love it.
And it's really opened up a kind of completely new channel in my life, that I never thought of. So I feel grateful. Yeah, I spent 6 or 7 years finishing the book. So it's a big effort, but I'm glad I made the effort.
Oh, it's wonderful. I know very quickly, you sort of identify 6 rules of happiness. I wonder if you can sort of give a quick run overview.
I've touched into some of them, but people kept asking me, what are your rules for happiness? What have you learned from this journey? Mm-hmm. So my 6 rules of happiness, they're in there, but building a strong foundation within yourself, the stuff we've talked about, a self-awareness, knowing what your vision, values, purpose is, what your reason for being is. If you can understand all of that, you've got a strong foundation. That's a good start. Then as you go, taking 100% ownership for everything that happens. It's not going to serve you to blame others, wait, hope, make excuses. You can do those things, but you don't really have an extraordinary life if you do that. You have an ordinary life. Third thing is about being courageous as a learner, adopting habits that really serve you. There's one I call becoming your own observer. We have this capacity as humans to step outside of our thinking mind and look at ourselves and notice we are thinking. And because we've got this observer faculty, we can know from that 100% certain know that we're not our thoughts. We are the observer of those thoughts.
Gotcha.
And that is a subtle thing, but it's huge impact on our lives because it means we've got choices in those moments to think something different. And we're not compelled. And then the last 1 or 2 were around proactively looking after your health and well-being. This is something that we all have to take ownership for. And that means how mindful are we? How well are we eating, dieting, sleeping, training, exercising, all those things? Because modern living is very prone to illness, burnout, stress, anxiety, and all that kind of thing. So that's come on the agenda more recently. And then the final one is the final rule for happiness, which I think probably the most important one is if you do all those 5 things I've just talked about, you've also then got to empower others to do the same. And that's probably the most important one. You can't just do it for yourself.
I love the idea of sharing the value is what I'm hearing from that.
Yeah, it's supporting others. If you get yourself up on top of if you get yourself up on top of the wall,
Hmm.
you then got to put a rope down and bring others up with you, you know. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
I love
that's those are my 6 rules in five minutes.
I absolutely love it. And for listeners, you've got a website, lifewithoutatie.com is your site.
Yeah,
So if
that's
they're
right.
interested in connecting with you or learning more about your book, they certainly can go there.
Yeah,
Um,
brilliant.
Ray, this has been awesome. I so love the life story, the journeys, the adventures.
Thanks, Audley.
Um, the big part, what I'm hearing from what you've gone through, which really inspires me, is the idea of bouncing back, the resiliency to move past situations that are
Yeah,
adverse, difficult, challenging, hard, and being able to turn that into something wonderful. And you've clearly done that. So
yeah.
certainly congratulations, but also to congratulations for staying on top of that wall and pulling up others as well. That's a great thing that you're doing. So I'm a big fan of it. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here on the
Thanks,
Audacious Living
Audley.
podcast.
You're welcome. It's been a real pleasure. I hope we get to meet again in real life at some point.
Yeah, that would certainly be awesome. Is there anywhere else you'd want to send listeners if they wanted to connect with you outside of your website? Is there any-
No, those places are great places
Perfect,
to go. I'm on LinkedIn too, if anyone else
perfect,
is.
amazing. Ray, this has been great. Thank you so much for the time, and be well, my friend.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Back, we are here on the podcast, and in today's conversation with Ray, we explore the importance of self-awareness and mindfulness in unlocking our true potential and living a fulfilling life. Through Ray's insights and experiences, we gain valuable lessons on the power of authenticity and self-discovery in achieving happiness and success. To learn more from Ray directly, I'd certainly encourage you to connect with him through the contact details provided in the show notes. You can reach out to him for personalized coaching and guidance on your own journey to living your best audacious life. Explore Ray's exclusive coaching programs and services designed to help you elevate your leadership skills, enhance your awareness, and achieve your goals with confidence. I invite you to visit the show notes for more details and all the offerings Ray has. And as well, I say thank you for tuning into the Audacious Living Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode and found value in our discussion, please consider following, subscribing, or sharing if you haven't already done so. Of course, this helps continue to grow and reach even more listeners like yourself. Stay tuned for Audacious and keep striving for your best audacious life. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.